Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of digging into an ideology, we're going to look at the structure of persuasion itself, how an argument is built. We're going to deconstruct the framework used in a source clip from Glenn Beck about preserving Western civilization. We're really going to get into the how and the why of its construction.
So the whole thing kicks off with this incredibly bold statement, there's no easing you in here. Nope. It just immediately establishes that there's a crisis. By saying the system has failed and that, hey, we all know it, it kind of creates this instant feeling of shared frustration, right? A sense of urgency that just sets the stage for, okay, what's the solution?
All right, let's dive in. The fascinating part here is that the source material itself literally gives us the blueprint right at the very end. The speaker lays out this super clear 6-part formula, so we're actually going to use that exact structure to break down the argument piece by piece so we can see how it all fits together.
So, to frame this big problem of a failed system, the speaker doesn't just throw a bunch of data at you. Nope. Instead, he tells a story. He creates this central choice by looking at 2 American companies that were basically on the verge of extinction. And that makes the whole problem feel really relatable, tangible.
And this visualizes that core conflict perfectly. On one hand, you've got the WPGC radio station. According to the source, they found success by just erasing their history. Then on the other hand, you've got the Fisher Body Company, which went from making horse carriages to car bodies. They adapted, and they preserved who they were at their core. So right away, a really clear choice is set up.
And boom, right after laying out those 2 paths, the argument hits you with this direct question. It's a really powerful pivot. It stops being just a story and becomes a direct challenge to you, the audience, to make a decision. It pulls you out of just listening and forces you to actively think about the solution being offered.
And here it is. This is the engine driving the entire argument, that full 6-step framework we were talking about. So let's break down each step and see exactly how the speaker's narrative was built using this precise pattern.
Okay, step 1. This is all about building a foundation, a sense of common ground. Think about it. Before you can talk about a problem that we all face, you have to establish who we even are. So the goal here is to bring up a shared past or some kind of collective identity.
And in this argument, that unifying memory is the whole concept of Western civilization. By putting that on the table as common ground right from the get-go, the argument creates this feeling of a collective we, a group that shares a history, and because of that, has a shared stake in what happens next.
Now that foundation of we leads us right into the second step, stating the problem. Now that a group has been established, the framework says you need to clearly and urgently define the crisis that this group is up against.
And the problem here is defined on a few different fronts. It's a systemic failure, sure, but it's also presented as an external threat to that shared identity. And there's an internal danger too, the risk of becoming totally irrelevant, kind of like the Fisher Company making horse buggies in the age of the car if they hadn't decided to adapt.
So once the problem feels urgent and the stakes are super clear, step 3 is all about giving a clear, simple, and positive statement of the end goal. What's the mission?
And the intent is stated really simply. It's not about conquest. It's not about revolution. The key word here is preserve. This frames the whole goal as a defensive, protective action, which is a very specific and pretty powerful way to position it.
And this is where that story comes back in to illustrate the intent perfectly. The whole Fisher Body story becomes the main analogy. They didn't stop being a company that makes bodies for vehicles. They just adapted their methods to preserve their core business. The message is pretty clear. Preserve the identity, but change the tactics.
All right, so you've got a shared identity, a clear problem, and a stated goal. What's next? Well, the 4th step is where things shift from just declaring something to mobilizing people. It's all about turning an idea into a mission for everyone.
The key thing to notice here is the language. It becomes super personal and inclusive. You hear phrases like join us, and the source really emphasizes things like we want to do it with you because we're family. That kind of talk works to transform one person's mission into a shared movement. It's basically an open invitation.
Okay, next up, the framework brings the argument full circle. It loops right back to the beginning to reinforce that emotional connection and remind everyone of the high stakes that were set up in step 1.
And this quote from the source is a direct callback to that initial unifying memory. It's designed to reconnect directly with the audience, to strengthen that family bond, and to remind them that their shared roots are the whole reason for this fight in the first place.
And finally, we get to the last step, After taking you on this whole journey, the argument has to end by painting a really vivid picture of what success looks like. It's got to answer that big question. Why should we even do all of this?
And the source wraps it all up with a really simple but powerful vision for the future. These 3 words basically capture the whole promise. The group will be stronger, its identity will be preserved, and it'll all be done together. It's a hopeful, unifying, and really compelling way to end it.
So when you put all the pieces together, you can really see the full journey here. It's a very deliberate 6-step pattern. It's designed to take an audience from a shared identity, walk them through a really specific crisis, and then lead them toward a unified, clear, and hopeful solution. It is, for sure, a powerful structure for persuasion.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought. Now that you can see the structure laid out, the story of the 2 companies, that really stark choice, how often do you notice this same technique being used elsewhere? How often are really, really complex issues framed not as this whole spectrum of possibilities, but as a simple, binary this or that choice?